Your jump to freelance starts here. Welcome to the Jump Moment.
You have no idea how much impact your business might have on the world. This week on the podcast, I am talking with Paul Cox. Paul is the founder of The Church Co. The Church Co. is a website building platform specifically designed for churches. In our conversation, a lot of things jumped out that were really encouraging to me. But one in particular that I want to bring up is Paul's humility in his approach. Paul wasn't setting out to build a global business, but that's what he has now, and that's what he's built. The Church Co. is helping churches across the globe present their message to their communities online. Something that Paul brought up when I asked him what it was that compelled him to move forward. He didn't lose his job. There was no crisis situation. But he said that it was the people that he was around who were further along than he was. They were motivators for him. With that in mind, I want to talk about this week's recommended resource, the Jump to Freelance group on School. This group is for creatives who are motivated and intentional about taking steps forward toward freelance. It doesn't matter if you're dreaming about it, actively planning, or currently taking steps to put you in a position to be able to make the jump to freelance. The group is for people who are moving in that direction. Freelancing can be lonely, and when we're in community, we can be both encouraged because other people get it, and as is the case in Paul's story, we can be inspired. I hope Paul's story is as encouraging to you as it was to me. Enjoy the episode. Paul, thank you so much for taking some time just to share your story of jumping to freelance, but really more than that, building a business. I'm really excited to hear your story, just having had some conversations with you over the last couple of years. But let's start with what you're doing now. Tell me a little bit about your business and what you're doing.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah. So what am I doing? Yeah, good question. Yeah. So essentially, I am the CEO of The Church Co. The Church Co. is a website and app and giving and small groups and events platform for churches. We're kind of global organization. I'm in Sydney, Australia. We've got a team kind of all around the world. But how it started was I just kind of, saw a need at the time. We've been around for 10 years now. Churches were struggling to build their own websites. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was, a better option than maybe just like Wix or Squarespace that was more tailored towards churches. And so kind of, set off to build that. And who knew that it would turn out to be what it was, or what it is. But 10 years later, it's kind of still around thriving with a team of employees now. So yeah,
that's awesome.
That's a quick overview.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I love it because this is close enough to the space that I was in for much of my career. And so you are spot on that the out of the box site builders, they just weren't sufficient for the needs that we had. And so for my various side projects, I would do, a Squarespace site or something. It's like, this works great for this problem. Then I think about, the church that we needed to redo our site. And I'm like, this just won't work. So I love that you saw that problem and I feel the benefit of it being in that space. That's great. So what were you doing? Were you in web before this? Like, what were you doing before making this decision to really lean into this problem that you could solve? What were you doing before that?
Okay, yeah. So bit of a long story, but I'll keep it short. So I went to University of Central Florida, got a degree in digital media, which was an arts degree at the time. That's how long ago it was, because there was I think it was the first year that people could graduate studying the internet and interactive systems. So yeah, hence the gray hair. Yeah, so did that, ended up working at AMD, which is a computer processor company. Decided in 2009 to do Bible college. So I moved to Sydney, Australia, where I did Bible college for what was supposed to be 1 year. I'm still here 15 years later. But yeah, did that for 3 years. And then, I was kind of like working remote back in like 2009, I was working remote, until, I decided that, couldn't do it at the time. The internet speeds in Australia were just too slow to facilitate the, remote working. So kind of stopped. And then I was a drum tech and guitar tech for a while. Ended up kind of finishing school, got a job at the church that I studied at. It was Hillsong. So I built Hillsong.com. That was kind of my project. So it was a pretty big project at the time. It was like rolling in 60 something different websites into one website. And, the whole time we kind of got questions like from other churches around the world, like, could you help us with your website? Can we just have the code of your website? Of course, we were kind of busy doing our own thing, so we couldn't really do that. But, I left staff there in 2015. I ended up working for an agency that was called Agency that kind of exclusively worked with nonprofits. And so built out all these fundraising campaigns for places like Baptist World Aid and Amnesty International and the UN. And that's when I decided to pick up the website project again for churches. So it was just kind of like, there really should be an option that has these tools that are like specific for nonprofits, but for churches, so that they don't have to spend, $5,000-$10,000 building these custom websites that, like you said, Squarespace, it doesn't even really have like an option for sermons. Like you try to hack it with blogs, but it doesn't really work. And so that's when the idea came around. A lot of software, a lot of drumming, a lot of backline teching, and then it kind of came full circle, and I was back as a software engineer building tech for churches.
That's great. Well, it sounds like, some of these stories are really interesting because there's this like dramatic moment. There's this like cataclysmic event in life. And it's like, that's when I knew that it was time to go, do my own thing. It doesn't sound like that's really kind of a missing piece here in the story. What was that catalyst for you? Was it just a continued desire to solve this problem? Or, what was it that really kind of pushed you, and using the language of the show, like that jump moment? What was it that really kind of caused you to jump or led you to jump?
It was more like being around people that were further down the road than me. Like when I was at the agency, everyone kind of had their own like little side product, like their little like SaaS, like software as a service, like someone had like a CRM, someone had an app they built. And I was like, well, I should have one. And they were all like kind of working on them, on the side. And so I was like, oh, I should just kind of do this. And I remember I got hired to build a church website, and I built the whole thing, and it was great. I'm not going to lie. It was a good one. And they never paid me, didn't come through. And I was like, that is it. That's the last church website I'm ever building. I'm going to spin this up as a platform. And if anyone wants to use it, they can. And it turns out that wasn't the last website I was ever building. A lot of people liked that website. And, I think we're like 5,000 churches now, that we've done with the Church Go. But it wasn't really like it was more just like, oh, this is fun. I think this is going to help churches. And I was super skeptical to kind of take the leap. I was like, I left Sydney and I moved to New York, and I was kind of like, it's expensive in New York. And so before I went full time, I brought on contractors, and I just kept like doing it that way until I was like, okay, we're officially making enough that I can afford to live here. I'm going to go full time. I'm going to take the jump. I did that February 8th, 2020. Lockdown orders came like a week later.
Man.
But it actually ended up being kind of like the perfect timing, because I think, at that moment, every church kind of redid their website, and we were already building it for free in a 1-week turnaround. And so I think we did like 300 church websites in the next 3 months. And so kind of just like fell into place at the right time.
Yeah, that's incredible. Anybody that I've talked to, really, no matter how long they've been dreaming of making a jump to freelance or doing their own thing, it never stops being, terrifying in some ways. And so I love that your approach was to wait so long that essentially you almost like had to do it now. Like, I think it's a smart approach.
I edge on the cautious side, I guess.
Yeah.
It was also because, for us, the Church Go, it was like a church signed up and just paid us $20 a month, and we built the whole website for free. So it was like, right. I wasn't getting like enough to cover. Like I needed thousands of churches to make it affordable. But I was like, I think we can do that if it's just like going to be a long haul of, doing a lot of work for free for a long time before this kind of starts to recur. And it took about 3 years, I think, from when I first started writing to when I actually started. No, it would have been 5 years from when I first started writing to when I went full time. Yeah. Having not made a dime for that first 5 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that kind of alludes to, the next thing I always love digging into. What was it that was preventing you from that decision or that jump? It sounds like some of it was the fact that there was a long buildup that needed to go into the business before it felt like it was something sustainable. Was that the big thing, or was there something else that was hesitation for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I was living in New York, so it was New York City. So it was, oddly more expensive. I remember telling my wife, Claire, I was like, I think we can go full time, but if it doesn't work, we will move so far away, to make it work. And I was like, I think we'll be fine. We ended up actually moving back to Australia in July of 2020. And so it kind of all worked out. But yeah, I was just really cautious. I was like, this has to be like a sure thing that I can provide for, my family and everything before I jump in. So, I mean, unfortunately, it was a lot of early mornings and late nights. I used to wake up at like 4. I'd go to a cafe at like 5. I would build like 5 church websites. Then I'd go to my job from 9 to 5. I'd come home, have dinner with the family, put my daughter to sleep, and then I'd go back out and build like 5 more websites. And I just did that for, years until it kind of worked out.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Don't really recommend, probably not the best, but
yeah. It is. I mean, it's interesting, because in this space, there's a lot of people that really advocate for the hustle culture. And I recognize that there's definitely a season where that's necessary. There's a time where that's the thing that you build, or that's the way that you build. That's the kind of the mentality. But I think on some levels, at least from what I'm hearing, there's a belief in what you were building, and probably in the fact that you're seeing it work, but also in the impact that you see that you're making. And so it seems like that in part fuels some of it, because there wasn't, again, like there are some stories where it's like, no, I literally lost my job. And so now I have to figure it out. There was that kind of a survival thing. But I love the tenacity to pursue something that you see making an impact and making a difference, and putting in that amount of effort and dedication, to pulling it off. Because I think there's a lot of fears that go into finally making the decision, but I think there's also dreams, there's also inspiration, there's also impact. For everybody, there's kind of a different catalytic thing that really pushes them over the edge. But so like at that point, you have something that you're building, and it isn't critical to your livelihood in the sense that you have a job. It's not like you lost your job or any of that. Can you kind of like pinpoint what was sort of driving you in that? Was the potential of it, the impact that you're making?
It was a good cause. I mean, I think at the time, if you talk about like 2015, Wix is relatively new on the space, right? And that nothing's working on an iPhone well when you're using Wix or Squarespace. Like, you could barely scroll. And so it was kind of like these churches are trying to spin up these websites, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot because you can't browse the websites. I can't find anything. I can't even scroll. It's crashing on my phone. And so I was like, if churches have better websites, maybe more people will attend church. So for us, it was kind of like what's in your hand. I had a lot of friends, that would write songs, and that's how they like contributed to the church. But I was just this coder. So it was like, what could I do? And so it's like, well, I can write code. It's kind of similar. And so that's what I kind of set about doing. So it's a pretty good cause. And then I also I wanted kind of freedom. I wanted the ability to kind of be like, hey, like, I had experience working remote like way earlier. Wouldn't it be great if we could go work from this location? Of course, then I had a kid, and then that was impossible either way. But, that was kind of like the motivating factors was this is a really good cause, and it kind of like sets me up for the lifestyle I want. But it's going to take a few years of doing the exact opposite of the lifestyle I want, to kind of lay the foundation to get to the place where it could.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it, because I think that sometimes we want to launch a business that is wildly successful right out of the gate. There are no businesses that are that way. And if you hear that there are, either that's a wild outlier or that is a stretch, because it does take that investment. That's great. I love that. I think that's a much broader sentiment post 2020, where a lot of us who wouldn't have normally had an experience with remote work experienced remote work. And I think there is a desire to really kind of create a little bit more freedom in life in terms of schedule and where you have to be when, that kind of stuff. And so that makes a ton of sense. But then, coupled with the impact that you're having through what you're creating, I mean, maybe that would get me up at 4. Maybe. Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it'll definitely keep me up at night. I'll put it on that end for sure. But yeah, that's great.
It does both, I think.
Well, yeah, well, that's the problem, is it's the both. That's the problem. Yeah, that's good. That's great. So you've been at this for a while now, and whether that be actually launching and kind of post making that jump, or even kind of the preliminary work on earlier in your career, that's something that I found to be a really powerful training grounds for a lot of this stuff, is these side projects. And so it makes me laugh when you're talking about the agency and how everybody seems to have a side project. It's like, yes, these are my people. I love this mindset. But looking back now, you mentioned that you're cautious, you're hesitant to make the jump, you really want to make sure everything's dialed in. What advice would you give, past Paul to say, hey, yeah, you could take a little bit more risks, or like, nope, it was a good call, you didn't take risks, but having the perspective that you have now, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I would have gone full time way earlier, maybe a year earlier. I think, yeah, just when you're solely focused on one thing, and your back's against the wall, you got to make it work. So I probably would have gone full time way earlier. I also would have hired full time people way earlier, um, than doing like kind of part time and contract. I think it has a lot of like what fights against you is distraction, and I think that fights against like people that work for you as well. You hire part-time people, they're kind of splitting their attention between two things. You hire full-time people, they're solely focused on this one thing. And so I think my biggest advice to myself back then would have been, yeah, go full-time earlier and hire full-time people earlier, if you can, because I think we would have
great.
got to where we are now probably a lot faster.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I mean, kind of in that statement, there's a little bit of a kind of acknowledgement that risk maybe isn't all bad. There are some motivators that come out of risk. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of don't have a choice at that point to find your next customer or go find a job. So
yeah,
backs against the wall, you kind of got to make it happen. Yeah,
I
think it's a good thing.
That's great. That's great. I love it. Is there, obviously when you build a business, it's different than when you're kind of making the jump to freelance. What I think is interesting about just the decision to make any jump at all, like did you envision what you are today in terms of the church co?
No.
Or did you just sort of anticipate, I have a builder that I can use that will help me as I am doing the work for other?
That was it. It was like, oh, like I've got like 90% of this church website done. I'll just bring on, and it'll be easier for me to do this thing. Yeah, no, I was very naive. I mean, immediately had to hire like someone to answer support tickets. Like we get, I think thousands a month of support tickets. So that's like a full-time job now. It's 2 full-time jobs now. So it's just, I was pretty naive, and I was just thinking, it'll just be me. It'll be completely passive. People will sign up, they'll build their own websites. Everyone will love this template exactly how it is. Yeah, it's not the case. But yeah, even the free website build, we used to be like, yo, build your free website. And then like a church signed up with like 300 pages. And I was like, okay, we've got to limit the amount of pages we can do. And it's like, okay, well, now there's like this assumption of revisions. And it's like, okay, we got to clearly define these things. It's kind of like, I think the biggest thing is just do it and then figure it out along the way. You can't like figure it out until you're actually doing it. Otherwise, it's just an idea. And I think life favors the doers. So get in there and do it.
That's great. When I love that, just that willingness to jump, even before you have everything figured out. Obviously, there's a layer of you should have some of these things figured out. There are some decisions or things you should plan for, things like that, but you aren't going to know everything ahead of the jump. And so it's so interesting to me to kind of see how it progresses. I love that wasn't like where you are today wasn't even the mindset that you were trying to build towards. I think a lot of times we hear stories of people who are like, oh, I wanted to have a Fortune 500 company since I was born. I was like, that was on my birth certificate. And it's like, I mean, I guess that's fine, but I think sometimes, at least what I'm seeing is when you take that step, risk, uncertainty, whatever, but you follow through on that idea. And like you're saying, you're a doer and you pursue it. You never really know where that can go. And that can go to a really, really big place. It can go to a small place. It can, wherever it goes, but you won't know until you make that jump. So that's great.
That's exactly it.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share just your insights with us. I'm always amazed at the path that people walk after making that decision, that jump moment after making the jump. And I appreciate your insights and even your advice looking back. Jump, go for it, try it, do it. Not necessarily burn the ships. Be smart about it. But until you start moving forward, you're never really going to know where it's going to get. So I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Paul. Something that jumped out to me was this idea of just taking the next step. So often we have dreams that are either too big to be accomplished today or are in some cases too scary. I don't know how to manage a Fortune 500 company. How am I supposed to lead that? You don't have to deal with managing a Fortune 500 company before you even make the jump to freelance. Paul's story is so encouraging to me because He just kept taking the logical, best next step in front of him. And it's led him to build a very successful, and I think even more than that, a very impactful business, one that he believes in, and I know that many, many organizations are thankful for. And at the end of the day, that might be what you're building. You're taking the first step, and the fears right now are, what am I going to do? Am I going to be able to pay the bills? Am I going to be able to solve insurance? Can I get clients reliably? Will anybody sign up for this piece of software or service that I'm building? Look, I don't know the answer to all of those questions, but I do know that you'll never find them if you never take that first step. So whether your jump moment is a couple weeks from now or years from now, start preparing today.
Thanks for listening to The Jump Moment. To find support for your jump to freelance, join our community at jumptofreelance.com.